In this video, I'm going to be doing a review and overview of the Drop Alt and Shift mechanical keyboards. And I will include links to both of these keyboards in the description of the video. So if you want to check those out while you watch the video, feel free to click on those and do so. They will be affiliate links. So if you click on those and purchase through that link, it will support me a little bit. And if you don't want to do that, just Google search the keyboard on your own and use that one. But now on to the review. So let's just jump in and talk about the Drop Alt keyboard first. So the Drop Alt mechanical keyboard is $180. So all of these keyboards are not cheap. So definitely keep that in mind when you're trying to make your decision about what you do or don't want to buy. And they do offer the Alt in a bare bones layout, which has no switches, which are what you actually click to type, and no keycaps, which are what you type on. So it would show up like this, and then you can buy those separately and install those yourself. It's not hard to do, but this is something that if you want to buy a bare bones keyboard, you probably know that's what you want to buy, where I assume the vast majority will buy the completed keyboard itself. Also, this is a 67 key compact layout, so that's generally considered 65% of 100% full scale, so much more compact than the Shift that I'll be talking about next. So with the Drop Shift mechanical keyboard, this is a $250 keyboard. It's quite expensive. And they also do offer a bare bones version, which you can just select from this page, which is $190 instead of $250. But just like the Alt bare bones, there's no switches, there's no keycaps, so you will have to buy those separately. This is a 99 key compact layout, so it is tighter than a typical full scale keyboard. You'll notice the 0 key on the numpad is shorter. It's usually about twice as big on most numpads. And the up and down arrows and left and right arrows are also compact in here. So it is smaller than a typical full-scale keyboard, and if space matters to you, that's certainly a benefit, but it might take a little bit of getting used to if you're used to working with a true full-size keyboard. But as you can see, these are nearly identical outside of the key layouts. So the big difference is the Alt has no numpad, it has no F keys, so you can ask yourself if that is something that you actually care about or not. And also, for example, there's no control key on both the left and the right side, which you typically see on full-size keyboards. I'll say I really like how compact this keyboard is, and if desk space is a concern to you, this is a great way to free up some desk space. Alternatively, when you're dealing with the Drop Shift, it does have your F keys, it does have a full numpad, so this is almost a typical complete keyboard, although some of the keys will have multi-function purposes. That would not be found on a full-size keyboard. Also, there's not a left and a right control because the arrow keys are taking up the right control key, where that would be at least on a full-size keyboard. There is a middle ground keyboard that Drop does offer. I don't have it personally, so I'm not going to review it, but that is the control. So the control has your F keys at the top. It has essentially a full normal layout of the keyboard with the control on the left and the right, but there's no numpad. So if you want that, if the numpad doesn't matter to you, but you do care about having your F keys for games or for programs, then this might be a really good option for you. I would assume the build quality and everything will be pretty much identical to the Alt and the Shift because those two are pretty much identical. So if you are interested in this one, just consider what keys you need and have that be the deciding factor. But let's just jump in quick to the overall build quality of these keyboards, which is definitely one of the higher points. So both are very solid, heavy feeling keyboards. These feel substantial. It doesn't feel like something that's going to break or bend or anything like that. These are exceptionally well produced. The aluminum frame gives it a very high quality feel. And also it's anodized aluminum, which should look absolutely great over a very long period of time. It's not going to rust or oxidize or have other issues that different types of metal can have. The magnetic feet on the back are high quality, and I've not had any issues with those falling off or becoming unintentionally detached. I did notice on the Shift compared to the Alt, the magnets on those little feet were way stronger, but my Alt is also much older than my Shift, so it's possible they've changed the strength of those magnets on both keyboards since the point in time when I purchased my Alt. And also, both of these keyboards are low profile, which basically means there's not that raised edge around the keys that they typically have. The keys are fully on top of the flat frame. So I personally prefer this because I have a cat who loves to run all over my desk and get hair everywhere. It's just easier for me to use compressed air and blow out the dust or whatever debris gets under the keys when it is a low profile keyboard. But Drop does offer at least the Alt and also I believe the Control in a high profile layout if you prefer that. It is more expensive, but it does have those raised edges. And I assume at some point, if the Shift sells well enough, they will also make a high profile version of that, since it wouldn't really make sense for them to offer different options like that across their entire family of keyboards. But as you can see, the Alt in high profile is $230 as opposed to the $180. So you are paying quite the premium to get that high profile keyboard. So you have to decide if that's something that you really care about and if it's worth that additional investment to you. And also, when you buy these keyboards, they're obviously more expensive than your typical mass-produced keyboard compared to something like a Corsair or a Logitech, at least most of the time. For example, I have personally had the Corsair K70 Rapid Fire keyboard. Right now, it's being sold for a lot more than I remember paying. It's $170, so really not that far off the Alt, although this is a full-size keyboard by comparison. But in terms of the quality, if I'm comparing this Corsair keyboard against both of the Drop produced keyboards that I have, I don't even think that's really a fair comparison. The Drop keyboards feel so much more substantial. The metal is so much more thick. The Corsair does have a metal frame to it, but I don't even think it's comparable, honestly. This just feels very light and flimsy in comparison. Also, the keycaps on this particular keyboard feel kind of slippery and smooth and just lower quality. The actual typing experience was fine, but I think the Drop keyboards are both much, much nicer to actually use. So you can decide if that additional money is worth it to you in comparison to mass-produced keyboards like this. Personally, I think it was worth the investment for me, but that's totally up to you, and we'll also talk about that a bit more later. So both keyboards also let you use a USB-C cable on either the left or the right side. So depending on where you want to run your cabling, that's a really nice benefit. And at least with the Shift, if you have a phone that charges off of USB-C, you can also use one of those ports on the back to charge your phone, which is a nice little perk. Past that, the overall quality control on these seemed to be really good. On my Alt, the caps lock key did come slightly bent. It doesn't sit completely straight in relation to the other keys. So that's a potential quality control issue. It's something that I wish, obviously, that keyboard did not have, but it's not really a huge deal breaker to me. I don't know if I replace the switch or the keycap, if that would resolve itself, because I haven't tried, but worth calling out. And a big selling point to these keyboards is the RGB lighting that both of them have. The RGB lighting is absolutely fantastic. It's very bright and vibrant, and it has several different patterns that you can choose from. You can also adjust the brightness levels, so you can decide how vibrant you want those light patterns to be. And you can also disable it completely if you don't want any lighting on your keyboard. Although I'd also say if that's the case, probably don't purchase this keyboard. You are spending a lot more on an Alt or a Shift or a Control for that really nice RGB lighting compared to other keyboards that exist without it. So if you don't want that, look elsewhere would be my recommendation. The only frustration that I've had with the RGB on these keyboards is at least when it's at max brightness. For example, when you get it brand new, I had to select the down level a lot of times before it actually started going down. There's something weird with the firmware, where I think it did that both with my Alt and Shift keyboards. So not the biggest deal, just a mild annoyance. One of those things that at this price point, I wish that was not the case. But once you get your light set up the way you want it, you're not going to be changing that and adjusting brightness levels all the time anyways. At least you're probably not. So not the biggest deal to me. And past that, the patterns of RGB can also be customized using the QMK firmware. And I'll also talk about that a little bit later in terms of what that firmware update process looks like and what the options are for customizing those patterns. There's a ton of awesome patterns built in, but if you do want to customize it, that is an option. So let's talk quickly about some of the different switches that you can get installed right from the factory, so to speak, when you're buying your keyboard on Alt. There's a ton of options. It can be hard to know what to do. So I've got two different options between my Alt and my Shift. With the Alt, I got the Kaihua/Kale box white switches. They're both, as far as I know, they can be shown as Kaihua or shown as Kale when you purchase them, but they're actually from the exact same company. They're the exact same switches. So whether you see Kaihua or Kale when you're purchasing this, same thing. But essentially the box white switches are clicky style switches. So they sound very, very clicky as you type on it. And a cool benefit of the box switches from Kaihua is that they're listed as being IP56 waterproof as well as dustproof. So if you're somewhat accident prone like me and you ever spill something on your keyboard, or if you just live in a dusty environment and you don't clean your keyboard as often as you perhaps should, that should protect you at least a little bit. And these keys actually have a very light key press, which makes it feel very, very fast as you type. For me, I've found it's easier for me to make mistakes on it compared to the Halo clear switches that I have on my Shift, but I really enjoy the very snappy, quick, fast typing of these switches, so much that I actually eventually replaced my Halo clear switches on my Shift with these Kaihua box white switches. But this is obviously completely personal preference when it comes down to switches, so you'll definitely want to explore and figure out which ones are best for you. If you aren't sure what switches are best for your needs, I will go ahead and link this page in the description where KBD Fans does offer some switch testers. Some of them can get fairly expensive, but for example, if you know you want Kale box switches, you just don't know which one you want, this is $7. It offers 9 different switches that you can press and decide which of those you think is best for you. I think the Kale box switches are excellent, so I would certainly recommend considering those, but they offer much bigger and different options as well. Like this one has 72 switches, but it's also $60, which is getting in the price range of a cheaper mechanical keyboard by itself. So up to you if that's something that matters to you, but there are options to test before you buy if you're unsure, and if you're unsure, I think that's a worthwhile thing to do. Also, these box whites have a very, very clicky sound. So it's very easy to audibly tell when you press down a key far enough to activate it because it makes that very, very distinctive clicking sound. So if you want a super quiet keyboard, that is not by any means the option for you, but I actually kind of like it. I like having that audible feedback, so that was a perk for me. Now, with my Drop Shift mechanical keyboard, I got Halo Clears installed from Drop, and they are a smooth style tactile switch. So the key press actually feels very, very linear as you press down, and it has a nice, solid, firm feel to it. It doesn't have quite as much audible feedback, so it's definitely more quiet than the box whites, and it also doesn't make a super distinct clicking noise. So it's just a preference. Do you want a really firm, solid, linear switch, or do you want a lightweight, very clicky switch with that audible feedback? But even then, there's tons of different options here that I have not personally tried, and that's where if you want to get a switch tester, test these out, decide which one is best for you. That's certainly something you can do. And a quick note too about the actual keycaps, which are the keys that you type on. So both keyboards come with double shot PBT shine through keycaps, which means that the letters on the keycaps themselves will pretty much never wipe off or disappear over time as you use it. And it also means that the LEDs will shine through the actual keycaps. They also come multicolor in different shades of gray. And I would essentially classify these as feeling all right. They definitely feel better than the Corsair K70 keyboard I showed earlier. Obviously that's personal preference, but I just think they feel higher quality. I wouldn't say they feel as nice as some of the super custom keycap sets you can buy for $100 plus, but I don't know if that's really a fair comparison. I do think they feel very solid though, and I don't think it'll be something that disappoints you. I will note that the RGB passing through them isn't always perfect because of how the switches can actually overlap with the part of the keycap that lets the light shine through. And at least on the Shift keyboard, some of the keycaps can be a little bit more difficult to read due to having multiple characters on the legend. So especially on the numpad where you have like the 0 key that also says insert, it looks kind of funky and not fully thought through in terms of how they did that, which I would generally label as a minor annoyance, not a deal breaker for me personally. And I've also replaced the keycaps on my Shift since that point in time, so it's really a moot point for me, but worth calling out. And also something that I think is worth calling out is the keycaps on both of these keyboards have sort of what I'd consider a very, very, very light sandpaper texture. Like it feels a bit gritty as you touch them with your fingers. I will say this does lessen over time as your fingers typing on them essentially wears down that gritty feeling a little bit. It didn't annoy me, but I did notice in review comments it does annoy some people. Some people don't like that very light gritty feel. So it's possible you will be one of those people, and therefore it's worth calling out. But of course, that is something that you can customize and replace should you desire to do so. And on the topic of customization, I mentioned QMK Firmware before, and essentially this firmware allows you to totally change up what every button on your keyboard does. So right now I am in Drop's keyboard configurator. This is for the Alt, but they have it for the Alt, Control, and then Switch. So you can go in and select the keyboard that you bought from them and then customize these. Essentially, if I want to change the Enter key to be a space bar, I just select it. I can go here to the space bar, click that, and then it goes ahead and updates it completely, which is kind of cool. There's also some special modifiers. If you want to adjust your keyboard keys to do some things special right from there, there's different modifiers. So you can go in here and kind of check out the different customization options. I'd say it's probably not typical for people to go in here and change all this stuff. At least that's not something I found myself needing to do, but the option is there to do it if you want to. And there's also multiple layers. So sometimes if you hold down the function key, for example, and then you click a key, it will do something else. So you can select one of these and create a special modifier. And outside of just remapping the keys themselves, you can also remap the behavior of the LEDs. So you can add new colors using hex codes if you want to do that. So any color you can imagine, just grab the hex code, add it in here, your keyboard will do that color custom. You can go in and select individual keys and change it to be like a rainbow, or have like one key be a rainbow, one key be green. Totally up to you. You can fully customize this as you need. Then essentially what you do is you compile and download this new firmware, and then you can just upload that firmware to your keyboard. I will say I tried to do this just to figure out what that process was like, and there's not a friendly, nice way of doing it. The instructions are pretty complex to the point where I decided I didn't want to spend the time to even figure out how to do it because I wasn't even that interested in changing anything. So there isn't a nice program that lets you just easily do this and then upload it to your keyboard. There's a few steps involved. You have to download a few different portions of programs to make this work properly. So I will say this is not a smooth, easy process, but I'm sure once you do it, it's easy to do again and again. But I also think customizing your keyboard like this is probably a non-typical thing to do for most people. So it probably won't affect you. But if you do want to do this, before purchasing the keyboard, you might want to look up the instructions of reflashing the firmware on the drop keyboards so you can decide if that's a process you want to deal with or not. Also, a perk to these keyboards is that the switches are not soldered in, so they are hot swappable, meaning you don't have to remove any solder from what's called the PCB where the switch goes into to remove the switch. So it's substantially more easy to swap the switches out to something else. You basically just use a switch puller, you pull out the old one and push the new one in. I redid my entire shift keyboard, and I'd say probably about an hour. Maybe I took longer than I should have, but it wasn't crazy, it just took some time. And of course, the keycaps can be fully replaced using a tool that Drop includes with the keyboard. You can also just use your fingers if you want to. The tool does make it slightly more easy, and it lowers the risk of you accidentally breaking a switch if you pull them off at a strange angle. And I actually did that with a custom set of keycaps that are available from Drop. So I purchased the Drop and Mateo MT3 Dev TTTY keycap set. This is fairly expensive as a keycap set at $95 for the 65%. If you want the full 1800 layout, it's $100. So not cheap at all. But these are based on the profile, so the overall shape of the key from 1970s IBM keyboards, which reminded me of the keyboards I used when I was a little kid that had a contour to the top where most keys now are pretty flat. So I figured it was worth doing just to see, and I really like how it looks visually on my keyboard. I was worried I wouldn't actually like typing on these because they do have a very distinctive concave shape to them. But after using them for about a day, it doesn't feel any different or strange to me really. So I like them quite a bit. So if you do want to customize your keycaps for either the actual shape or just aesthetic reasons, you can certainly do that. And it's super duper easy to do. It should only take you a couple minutes to swap out all those keys. But now on to the conclusion. So overall, I'm happy that I purchased both of these keyboards. I actually don't have a need for both of these keyboards, but I initially purchased the Alt. And when I realized I really missed having F keys and numpad keys, I saw that Drop was making the shift. But do keep in mind, when you purchase one of these keyboards, you are paying a lot of money for the aesthetics. So you're paying for the RGB and you're paying for that really nice metal frame. A lot of mechanical keyboards have what I call a very gaming aesthetic. For example, looking at the Corsair K70 RGB, definitely a strong gaming aesthetic to it. So if you want something that looks a little bit more professional, I think either of the 3 Drop keyboards is an absolutely awesome possible option for you there. And also just generally speaking, it's my philosophy when buying things to just buy the best thing first so you don't feel like you have to upgrade and ultimately spend more later on. So I was happy to pay the premium involved with these keyboards, but obviously everyone works within a certain budget. So decide what keyboard fits your budget and your needs the best when trying to make this decision. And when I mentioned the metal frame or RGB, if that isn't something that you care about, there's without question cheaper options out there that will be as good or close enough to as good that you can look into. I'd suggest the brand Ducky, that I know is a favorite of mechanical keyboard fans. So final verdict for me, I do have a buy recommendation on both. I think if anyone bought either one of these two keyboards, they're not going to be disappointed. But of course, that depends on what is your budget. Does this purchase price seem really extreme to you or not? I do think either keyboard should last a super long time. And since it's really easy to remove the switches and replace them, if any switch has issues over time, you can just replace that switch with a new one. You should be good to go. And of course, I will link both of these in the description if you want to check those out and decide which one of these two keyboards is best for you based on the reviews, and even just check out the reviews from customers to see if they have any issues that you might find frustrating or would prevent you from wanting to purchase this. But that is it for this particular video. Thank you so much for watching through this. I do hope it was helpful. And if it was helpful, feel free to hit that thumbs up button to let me know. And also, if you want to see more videos like this in the future, please subscribe. I'll do my best to keep creating new content just like this. But that's it. Thank you so much for watching.